Welcome to the Transform podcast series, hosted by Vercium, a learning and development organisation specialising in medical affairs. Each episode, we will explore different topics with our Vercium team and expert guests to bring you the latest thinking in learning and development. In today's episode, we will be focusing on the subject of transformational learning, how we define it, why it is so important in the learning environment, and how we know when someone has undergone transformational learning in practice.
Hi everybody, this is Amanda Alexander, and in today's podcast I am interviewing the founder and director of Vercium, Lee Hallworth. And Lee has had over 10 years experience in medical affairs development. And today I want to ask Lee something that I know is really close to his heart, which is transformational learning. Lee, tell me, what is, in your definition, what is transformational learning? What's that transformational piece all about?
Hi, Amanda. Well, I think transformational learning means different things to different people. I think for me, I have seen transformational learning. So before I worked in medical affairs, I worked in a lot of different capacities, and one of those was in teaching of young adults and seeing them literally change as human beings, grow as human beings, become better versions of themselves, learn or acquire a new skill, or maybe even just let go of something that wasn't serving them so that they can progress, develop, move forward. And I think that's, in that sense, it's easy to see transformation. But with adults, I think sometimes there's more of that letting go of what wasn't perhaps serving them evident. And it's utilizing or realizing that something's not that something can serve them, and there was something that wasn't serving them. So it is literally transforming from one state, position, or way of thinking or doing, and moving to another approach. I think that's how I would see it with adults. There's more of a letting go of something and moving into that new space.
So how did you notice this when you were doing it in practice, that this letting go happened?
So it's it's a little bit of a story there. So having spent a long time in education with young adults, I knew a lot of people that worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and I was being persuaded a lot by my friends and then colleagues afterwards to work with them, because I was helping them with some presentations and helping them actually learn some of the things that they needed to learn to do their job well. And I kept getting told that, well, what I do would be really usable within the pharmaceutical industry. So I thought, well, why not give this a go? I've been in teaching a long time at this point. I thought, well, I can always go back. So, and the first 6 to 8 weeks of your time in terms of the pharmaceutical industry is you spend a lot of time in intensive training. And what I noticed as I was put into the position of the adult learner was the learning environment was very different. You weren't as involved as much. Everything was imparted upon you, and there was a lot more responsibility on the learner to retain and utilize the information that was being presented. And I thought there was a trick missing, and I thought the environment could be developed and enhanced to make learning more exciting and more stimulating for the learner, so learning happens more effectively. And that was a big aha moment for me. And I actually got the chance to do that later on when I'd been in pharma for 2 years on a big stage, and that was quite a momentous occasion, because it kind of allowed me to see if my theory worked, and it did. So
what happened?
So I was working in a commercial team. I was working in an educational capacity within a commercial team. I was a nurse educator, and the performance of the team across the UK wasn't doing very well, and we were approaching the last quarter, and the commercial director wanted to do something to lift the performance. And I happened to meet him in a bar, and he was telling me after a drink or so that what he wanted to do. And me also having a drink, I said, well, I don't think that's going to work. And I explained to him basically what I just said to you, that I think you have to involve people, you have to create an environment where they can speak freely and honestly if you want to truly develop them. I think that people just pay a lot of the learning in the corporate environment lip service. And so to cut a long story short, he said, okay, well, you do it then. And so he asked me to put my money where my mouth is. And he put me on stage in front of the whole company and the whole team. But he'd also booked a sports personality who was very famous, somebody called Chris Agabusi, that had to, meet his energy on stage, which was very high. So it was a very big ask for myself. But what we did was we gave people permission to be honest and show vulnerability. So I basically did that by being one of them and explaining that some of the things that we were asked to do and some of the messages and some of the data that we were utilizing wasn't quite right. And to buy into it, we needed input. And this really opened up a can of worms for people to then show other things that they felt weren't working. And so this created a platform for a blank piece of paper, so to speak, for us to work together, to collaborate. So the field force to collaborate with the people working at strategic level. And what we did is create this really stimulating environment where people took ownership, took responsibility for their role, because they were involved at the sort of the design phase of how information, data, and messages should be communicated. And it was a wonderful experience, and we got incredible feedback. And I knew then that this was transformational because there was a lot of emotional people, because they'd be given that opportunity to say those things. And at the end of the 2 days, there were people approaching the stage. There was lots of hugs. There was, people saying they hadn't seen anything like this. And it was just that openness, that honesty, that permission to speak freely, created this shift, which was transformational. And that's where I thought, this is what I want to do. This is, you're having working in learning is rewarding anyway, but doing it on this scale and to this level was really, really rewarding. And that's when I decided that this is what I want to do.
Wow, there's a real purpose-driven thing there. Why do you think people in pharma in particular need transformational learning?
Well, I think you get people that operate in a role, maybe for a long time, or within a team for a long time, or you get teams that operate in silos, you get people that get stuck, or you get people that get comfortable, which I think is another form of stuckness. And as we get older as adults, we tend to reinforce things that have served us in one situation. And as we progress throughout our careers, perhaps they're not serving us as we move forward. So coming back to that, needing to let go of things that may have served us well in another context and perhaps not serving us well now. And they need that help and support to create that environment where they feel safe that they can do that.
Okay, thank you. So once we've had people in a training program within that transformational learning environment, what do you look for to know that they've actually undergone that transformational learning rather than transactional learning?
Well, I wouldn't say I proactively or consciously look for, have we achieved transformational learning in every single individual? So obviously, as any other learning provider would have, we have feedback, we get qualitative and quantitative analysis, which shows us that the experience that the learners have had. We get feedback, we have detailed conversational feedback with the stakeholders. And then obviously we follow the learner as they utilize those skills and that new mindset as they take that into their day-to-day role. And we give them mechanisms to help them do that. So it's not just ended. So that transformational journey may not end at the end of a particular learning solution. So we keep a close eye on it all the time. So instead of a point in time, there is a journey that they go on. And I think the first thing that I look for with learners is, first of all, that stuckness. So you know this, Amanda, don't you? I'm sure you've seen it when you worked in workshops, either online. You know, if it's online, people might have the camera on, off, which again is usually for me an indication of their level of buy-in. And when it's face-to-face, you can see their body language, their face, if they're bought into this. That if you look at it at a room level, you can see if people engage when you ask open questions. And sometimes you need to either perhaps clear the air from a sometimes a cultural point of view. We've had to do that on rare occasions, or you have to ask questions that enable people to buy into the subject matter at hand. And so once you get past that stuckness, I think then you see a lift in the level of engagement. So that's the next part. It's okay, so we've got the space created. How are we going to leverage that? How are we going to utilize that? And this is where I think people like you and the team really come to their fore, when you've got those people in that malleable space and we know they're ready to learn. And then I think when we've taken them through new skills, new mindset, new ways of working, and then it's reinforcing that reinforcement and seeing if there's buy into the reinforcement, if there's real commitment. Are they taking responsibility? Are they showing, are they looking for further support? All those things are indicators along that learning journey as to whether they are having a transformational experience, I would say.
Absolutely. And one example comes to mind as you're talking, who I think could almost be our poster boy for transformational learning, was someone from a recent workshop we did over in the States, who his transformational was so extreme. We noticed that he went from the beginning with his arms folded and saying, well, I'd like to see how you're going to deliver all of these expectations that we've been putting up. And at the end, he was saying, when can I sign up for the next one?
Oh, was that the chap who was in my breakout? Who
That's
was
right,
the data, the guy who collated all the data? Yeah. So he was a very nice person. He was understandably skeptical. It was a presentation skills workshop, wasn't it? But it was that's how he perceived it. But what he didn't know is presentation skills was the tools to generate a collaborative mindset, a collaborative culture. So I think that's one thing that from a client's perspective that's transformational is we don't just look at the skills that are, or the outcomes, that the learning outcomes that are required. We also look at the context in which they exist within. So for example, I've also done about 5 years of working in organizational development. And I've been in situations where you're supposed to deliver some learning, but the company's not in the right place, or the staff aren't in the right place. They might be going through significant change, or even a redundancy round, which has happened. So we get an indication of the culture and where they are and what they need. And I know the chap that you're referring to, I know the culture at the time, speaking to the stakeholders, was one where people were scared to make mistakes. People felt they needed to know all of the information. And so therefore, when they were presenting, they were always just on transmit. And they didn't want to let go and ask a question in case the conversation went to a place where they had no knowledge. And therefore, they were operating from a fear basis. And so what we did was create that safe space where they could do that. Even to people who they presented to didn't have that context, but they could add value. And when the guy that you're speaking about let go and asked questions and involved the audience and got insight into why some of his data might have been valuable to them, it was a real eye-opener. And I think that was a transformational moment. But we wouldn't have got that without that cultural context about the fear and the fear of making mistakes within the teams there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about knowing what's going on and achieving that deeper level of communication with the people we're working with. And I guess that's one of the things that we do as a team. But if you were to perhaps encapsulate what factors contribute to creating transformational results within a workshop, what would you highlight?
I think that's a really good question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer, but I'll do my best to think of the thing. So the first thing I think of when you say that, Amanda, is people like you who truly care about the development of others and about the learning environment that learning exists within. People who want to do something meaningful. So we're very fortunate in that we can choose to work with people that have that same mindset. So because there will be opportunities where the learner wants to back away, needs some encouragement, or is losing focus, and to have that skill set, that ability to notice that, whether it's through EQ, through the body language, through listening, through being a good human being as well as a learning professional, to have that empathy to understand, where the learner is over a 1 or 2 day or 1 or 2 hour learning process, and being able to step in at the right time with the right intervention, I think is key. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is generally to have natural empathic people as well, which is part of the EQ mix, but to constantly put ourselves into the learner's shoes. And I think we ask ourselves that a lot. We ask ourselves and the clients constantly through these learning solutions, how they reacting, what's going on, and we ask the learners themselves. And having that collaborative mindset with the learner, so it's not we're teaching you this. I think we always say at the outset of every learning solution that we put forward, whether it's electronically, whether it's on demand, whether it's face-to-face and interactive, you're part of this learning environment. You have a responsibility not just to learn yourself, but to contribute to the learning of others. So I think giving the learner that responsibility to themselves and to others is also key. And I think a big thing is, and I don't know if it's determination or bravery, because sometimes learners put up significant barriers, and it's the ability to see through them without letting them affect you. So if someone's truly resistant or obstructive to the learning process, whether it's publicly or just in a one-on-one situation, that can evoke some, it can almost trigger some of the people who are managing that learning environment. But understanding that usually those blocks come from a place of fear sometimes, or challenge. We're using up their valuable time. Is it worth their value? And they're putting that challenge at the front. And I think understanding where those blocks come from and accepting them and truly trying to understand them goes a long way to show the learners that we care as well. So I think right from the outset, the learner, we do care, the learners know we care, and the learners know they're part of that and they have a responsibility. And I think what all of those things do then creates an environment where everyone knows this is going to be high value, but we've also got we've got to work together to do it. So I think those are the fundamental aspects. And at the end of each one, we hold them accountable. We ask them what they've learned, and ask them to make that public. So that accountability doesn't go away. They can't really hide behind it, so to speak.
No, we certainly don't give them anywhere to hide. And what you've said, I think the key quality is that of emotional intelligence, and being able to us delivering, facilitating, managing our own emotions, and being able to recognize and be empathetic towards what's going on with the people we're working with.
Yeah, managing your own emotions is key, because we do get a lot of challenges sometimes, especially at the outset of a meeting, sometimes, and where somebody hasn't, the communications maybe not got to them why they're in that position at that moment. And so you have to create that buy-in process all over again. And sometimes some of the resistance can often be personal. Why are you here? And in front of a big public audience, which is, that anxiety associated to that never quite goes away. And when that comes up, you've got to manage it well. And so I think that's where empathy helps. So, understanding where that's coming from, and it's not personal, and that it's genuine. And I think I've seen you and I've seen other people in the team have to face those difficult situations. And I think how we handle them is quite critical, because it can almost make or break you, especially if it's quite a challenging challenge. So yeah, and I think one thing I've learned from you actually, in your role as the subject matter expert around self-leadership, is that empathy plays a crucial part in that. And I think I remember a quote that you said to me is that fear cannot exist where curiosity and empathy live. And it's never been a truer thing. And I think that's something I try to utilize and could do more of myself. But I think that's something many of our team members have naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that point of curiosity, that's definitely a subject for another podcast. So I've just got one last question for you. I'd like to challenge you to express transformational learning in one sentence.
Being brave, being self-aware, understanding what's not serving you, and having the courage to step out of your comfort zone.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you found it useful, please consider sharing with a colleague. To learn more about what we do or listen to further podcasts, please visit our website, vercium.com.